Hey friends, welcome to the JOANNA WHALEY podcast. Today is going to be an interesting episode. If you are listening to this when it comes out, just 48 hours before the recording of this podcast, there was an attempt on the life of a presidential candidate. And we're going to be having a whole conversation today about that. But before we begin that, if you are like me, and as we'll dive into in this podcast today, these are very uncertain times. And if you're an LGBTQ person or an ally or a parent of a queer kid and you need support right now, you can go to JOANNAWHALEY.com/support. You can join my Patreon at patreon.com/JOANNAWHALEY, and you can have direct access to me and unlimited Zoom calls and direct messages right there. Go to patreon.com/JOANNAWHALEY. And the other side of the music, we're going to have a great conversation. Here we go. Hey friends, welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, JOANNA WHALEY. If you are just joining me live on TikTok at JOANNA WHALEY Music, on Facebook or YouTube, we are going to have a really different podcast today. We're in this kind of 4-week series called Project 2025. But today, just like last week, was a little bit off script. We are way off script today because 48 hours before the recording of this podcast, I had to throw the whole script out. Here's why. I was driving back yesterday from a very peaceful, lovely Saturday here in Michigan, where I live. And full disclosure, I was on a date, and I'm driving home from the date. And part of my preparation for this podcast, and this is going to be kind of some backstage stuff for you all. One thing that I do to prepare for this podcast and to get better every time I go live and interact with people here, this is going to sound so nerdy, but I listen to sports talk radio. Okay, so listen to sports talk radio. And the reason I do that is because sports talk radio teaches me a lot about how to do this show. I listen to the hosts, and honestly, I don't give a crap about the sports ball. I used to be an athlete, whatever, pre-transition. But I listen to sports talk radio to listen to how the hosts interact with other people. So that's what I do. I just love listening to them and just learning how to be a better radio host, how to be a better podcaster. So I'm doing that yesterday. I'm driving home from a date. It was great. It was fun. It was a good time. And it was an early date. And in the middle of this like sports radio show, the host says something and says, and I'm quoting, says, "This show is going to take a turn." And that caught my attention. Because, I was just listening mindlessly, and the host started to tell those of us listening the events that were unfolding in Butler, Pennsylvania. If you're living under a rock, maybe you don't live in America, just on Saturday, just right before this podcast recording, there was an attempt on the life of a former president and a candidate for the president of the United States this year. And I was now I don't advise this. I had the Peacock app on my phone as I'm driving home. I turn on Lester Holt and I turn, obviously now listen, hands free. But I'm watching everything transpire right in front of me. And I just watched over the next few hours the news reports rolling in. And something was striking me. If you're new to my show, live at TikTok at JOANNA WHALEY Music or any of my other channels, I'm a transgender woman. I'm a former evangelical pastor. And in this moment, I found myself at a crossroads. Because if you're new to my channel, I'm a very liberal Christian. I'm a Christian. Yes, I'm a queer Christian. I'm very, very liberal. And of course that came up on my dates, on every date I've ever been on. Wait, so you're religious? You know, anyways, that's a different topic for another day. But what I found myself in this moment was an immense crossroads between my pure disdain for the former president of the United States, but also my desire to see all human beings as worthy of love and life. This might just be me. A lot of people giving input on our live channels at JOANNA WHALEY Music on TikTok and on Facebook. I see all of you, Reese, Megan, William. I see you all there. And I found myself at this crossroads where my fears of what was going to come next began to show itself. My fears that we will be even more divided as a nation than ever. And my fears that those of us who identify as liberal will become even more targeted and hated in this time. And now, before everybody gets mad at me, today's podcast is not going to be about me saying, oh, us poor liberals. That's not what this is going to be. What I want to do today is I want to process through. What do we do when someone we don't like is speaking? And how do we manage the tension of disdain for somebody or not liking someone's politics or ideas, but how do we find their humanity? I honestly, during the hours I was watching this news coverage of what was going on in Pennsylvania, my fear of further division politically and listening in my head to the pastors I served under for many years and what they would be potentially thinking about this issue, and the religious doubling down and vilification of those who don't like Trump. These became my fears. And then I began to think about when something like this happens to a presidential candidate, their approval ratings go through the roof. Okay? So me as a liberal Christian, this is oh, great. You know what I'm saying? And as I said, that's a terrible thing I feel like I just have to say, I know it sounds terrible for me to think that, but when these things happen, I mentioned this last week. Anybody watch The West Wing? When President Bartlett, had this same situation, he won the election. Basically because of it. And so what's going through my mind is this moment, this thing could propel a presidential candidate I don't really care for into a win. And if this happens, do those of us who don't agree with conservative politics or Christian conservatism, are we going to be vilified? Will something like this make us more divided than ever? And those of us who are LGBTQ in the community, I'll be honest with you. The moment this hit the news, I got nervous for myself, for other LGBTQ people, because I've heard the things that are said about the queer community from this political candidate. But what do we do about it? This is going to be a really different show today. If you just join me, normally I talk for like 30 minutes. I can talk. I have this thing called pastoritis, but I don't like have, I don't have much of a script today. I want to process this. And I want to say this today. I don't have to vote for a candidate to respect a candidate's life. I don't have to respect someone's politics or believe in their ideology for me to see them as human. So here's what I want to think about today. And I want to make a commitment to those that listen to this show. The thousands of you, and I'm so honored by the thousands of you who watch and listen to this show each and every week. But I want to make a commitment before you. I want to commit that I'm going to be a lot more careful about how I talk about people that don't agree with me. I want to be really careful, and I want to be really honoring not to the ideology. Because if you watch my show, I will call out ideology. But what I want to be really careful moving forward as a queer theologian, as somebody who speaks into these spaces, is to be somebody who is much more careful about honoring the humanity of someone I disagree with. No matter if you like a political candidate or not, we must see them as human. And because I'm a theologian, we have to understand that they are made in the image of God. I want to be honest with you. And this is really like, if you asked me 72 hours ago to make this statement, it would have been really challenging for me to make. But I think in light of the events that have happened in the last 2 days, I've come to this place. When I was watching the former president, Donald Trump, somebody that I really disagree with, somebody that I really politically am not okay with, as a queer person, as a person in general, I couldn't get over the fact of watching someone in that moment, when I saw Donald Trump grab his ear, down on the ground, blood coming down his face, I was reminded that this is a human being. A flawed human being, but a human being. And I'm saying that as a queer person who will never in a million years vote for this man. But in that moment, I was reminded that on the other side of my disdain for this person was a human being. And that's going to set us up for the rest of what we're going to talk about today on this show. And when we come back from our commercial break, I want to talk about some things I'm really thinking about of how we can move forward and be better. Thank you for joining the podcast today. Don't go anywhere. On the other side of this music, we're going to talk and get really in the weeds about some of these thoughts. Stick with me. We'll be right back after this short commercial break.
And on that day, you gave your breath away. You took the highest place.
Hey friends, if you're like me, when I came out and navigating my queerness, there was a lot of spiritual questions and not many pastors that I trusted to ask the questions to. Well, on Patreon, patreon.com/Joanna Whaley, I've kind of become an online pastor for many LGBTQ people and parents of queer kids who are just asking questions about spirituality and queerness. For as little as $1.99 a month, you can join our Patreon community. And it goes all the way up to $9.99 a month with different features and bonus podcast content. You also can direct message me and free Zoom calls with me in an unlimited basis. Go to patreon.com/Joanna Whaley. That's patreon.com/Joanna Whaley. Join the community today. All right, friends, welcome back. I am so honored to have you all here today. If you're just joining us live at Joanna Whaley on TikTok, Joanna Whaley Music on TikTok, Facebook, or YouTube, we are talking about these events that transpired in the attempt on former President Trump's life. And I'm a queer Christian. I am a liberal Christian. And I want to read you a passage of scripture. Yeah, a queer person, a trans person reading the Bible. I know, it seems so crazy. Matthew 7:12 says that, so in everything do to others which you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law of the prophets. You see, this principle encourages us to treat others with dignity, respect, acknowledging each other's humanity and worth rather than dehumanizing them. And I have to be honest with you. There have been times as a queer person, as a trans person, that I have, and if you're just joining us again, I was an evangelical pastor. And I was like all Republican. I was like ultra Republican, like voted for every Republican ever, like that was my life. And then when I started to understand myself, I started to see that some of the policies of Republican politics were not going to support my humanity. And so I definitely became very liberal. But what I have to be honest with you and just kind of like, gosh, I hate, it's like such a churchy term, but like repent before you to say that, like, I have looked at Republican people and conservatives and honestly, even pastors that I worked with and can't stand, I have thought in my mind ill of them. And I have read passages like Matthew 17:12. It says, so in everything do unto others that you would have them do to you. I've got to be more careful with my words. I really do. But that doesn't mean I don't advocate for the things that are right. I believe that LGBTQ rights are the right thing. But what I want to begin to do is speak against the ideology rather than the person. And that's what I need to get better at. I can detest Donald Trump, but I can still see Donald Trump as a human being. And I can still, I can look at Aunt Cindy at the barbecue this summer with her red hat and her opinions, and I can see Aunt Cindy's humanity. So what are some things we need to start doing? I think one of the first things, we need to start understanding and focusing on our shared experiences. If you're new to my podcast, to my content, I am a queer theologian. I speak into LGBTQ and faith issues. So let's think about this. I talk about this each and every week on my show, that we need to get to a place where we see common shared experiences and understand that there are queer people who are Christian. There are queer people who are Muslim. There are queer people who are American. Okay? And we need to understand and find the shared experiences. And we might have different ideas of how to operate in those places, but we need to understand that we have shared experiences. I hear all the time from people on all my channels, get messages and comments all day long. You're not a Christian. You're not a Christian. You're not a Christian. Yes, I am. And if we can find a place to find our shared experience, we can begin to find each other's humanity. And we need to humanize the disagreements. We need to stop labeling each other. Now, many times I call myself a liberal here. It's kind of a lack of a better term, but like, I'm just someone who, I'm somebody who prioritizes, I prioritize human rights in my world. While some of my other friends may prioritize, they don't think human rights are a bad thing, but some of them do, but but they may prioritize other things. Maybe we need to just find ways to humanize our disagreements. We need to learn to listen and not just wait for our turn to say something. Not just wait for our moment to just let the other person finish talking so that we can try to make our point. What if we just listen? Even if we disagree, what if we could just listen to somebody? Wow. What a concept. What if we could acknowledge each other's feelings? What if we could validate each other's emotions, even if we don't agree with them? And there's many people that I do not agree with their opinions. I look in my chats right now. If you follow at Joanna Whaley Music on TikTok or on Facebook or YouTube, there's all kinds of terrible things said to me right now in this moment. But I want to know, why do you feel that way? If I were to meet you in person and you were to say, yeah, but you're just a guy in a dress, I want to understand, okay, I understand if what I'm hearing, how I want to respond to you is I want to say, I hear what you're saying. Help me understand why you believe this. And let's have a conversation instead of just hurling insults at one another. We need to understand that many times we have common goals. I heard somebody say today, conservatives just want, they want freedom. But listen, so do I, as a liberal LGBTQ person. I want freedom. These are common goals. Now, getting back to my area is me as an LGBTQ person, I want access to my faith. And we all believe, if you are a Christian, that everyone is welcome in the kingdom of God. So can we just find and understand that we all want that? And how we get there might be totally different. But if we can open our ears to listen to someone's story, we might be able to find a more respectful way forward. And we can challenge each other, absolutely. But what we've got to do is do it through understanding, rather than just saying, you're a conservative, I don't like you. you're a libertarian, you're a what do people say? It's offensive. Sorry if this makes, you're a libtard or whatever they say to you. You can't say, you're just a loony clown, which is stuff I've seen in my chats today during this recording. We need to be able to see each other's humanity. Like that person that you're commenting to is a person. Is a human being. Made in the image of God. That person is a human being. I think we need to move away from you statements into I statements. So let me explain what I mean by this. Maybe you're listening to this and there's somebody that you're listening to and this is not a very spiritual conversation today. My content this month is not as spiritual as normal, but I think we need to move away from saying you just don't like gay people. You don't like queer people. You are a bigot. Or you are a man in a dress. These are the statements that we throw at each other. But what if we could change them? What if we were to say, hey, I am hearing you say this. Can you please tell me what you mean by this? I am not sure I agree that you should get married as a queer person. Maybe these are the statements we need to start using instead to try and understand one another. And we need to celebrate small things, small victories. I have neighbors in my neighborhood who are conservative. And I'm sure I'm going to see the MAGA signs in the front yard. But there's been small victories, like the wave hello, or the 2-minute conversation while walking by the house. This person knows that I'm trans, knows that I fly the rainbow flag in the house during Pride Month. They know. But there's a small victory there. And maybe we just need to start celebrating those things together. There's so many things that I have gotten wrong in the way I talk about someone I disagree with. So here's some commitments I want to make to you. I want to make a commitment to 2 things I'm going to leave you with. The first thing is I'm never going to stop advocating for people's rights in the LGBTQ community to access their faith and their humanity. I will never, ever, ever stop advocating for queer people. The second one, though, is I'm never going to stop building bridges with those who don't understand our community. And that's going to make liberals mad. How dare you give a conservative a voice to speak? It's about building bridges. And I think it's the only way forward. So I don't have to agree with you to see your humanity. On the other side of this music, I'm going to open this up. Now, I might turn off the request to chat with me. We'll see. But I'm going to turn it on and we're going to take calls. I've got all kinds of stuff coming in. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short commercial break. Hey friends, can you do me a huge favor? Would you share, subscribe, rate, and comment on this podcast wherever you're listening to it? Sharing it means the world. Commenting, rating means the world. I want this message to get to as many people that need to hear it as possible. That's one thing you can do. Another thing, did you know that all of the music on this podcast is my own? Yeah, I get copyright things all the time, but I have to tell all the streaming services it's my music. All you have to do is go to any streaming service and search my name, JOANNA WHALEY, and you can listen to every one of the songs you hear on this podcast. You can also support this show and get support by going to patreon.com/JOANNA WHALEY. I'm so happy you're here. Join a community, listen to a song, and share and rate this show. Thank you so much. All right, welcome back, my friends. We're gonna kick this thing off today with we had a voicemail come in from Susan, so we're gonna kick that off right now. Here we go.
Hi, Joanna. It's Susan Rohan from Spencer, Iowa. I don't really have a question so much as I just want to thank you so much for being such a positive influence in my life and the lives of so many transgender and queer folks around. I just love being able to send people your way who are struggling with identity and their needs, and it just gives me such joy and such pleasure to be able to send people that I don't have the answers for. So thank you so much for all of that. And your podcast is meaningful to all of the Christians out there that are like me. And I hope that people who can't see that will be able to see that in the future. So keep doing what you're doing. Just keep doing what you're doing, because there's so many more people out there like me that don't necessarily.
Oh, well, that got cut off. But Susan, thank you. If you ever want to leave a voicemail on the show, go to joannawhaley.com/live, and you can always leave a voicemail. Yeah, there's a lot of queer people out there that, first of all, want spirituality, that want access to their faith, and that's why I keep doing what I do, no matter the political environment. And so, and I know right now there's queer people listening and watching the show that are fearful about what even the events that have happened in the last 48 hours with Donald Trump, what it could mean for their rights in the future, because this could lead to a huge win. So what do we do? And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here to talk about these issues. If you're live at JOANNA WHALEY Music on TikTok, feel free to hit request to join. I'd love to chat with you. If you have questions on any of my other platforms, feel free to just text those questions in. I do have a text message from Sarah in Austin, Texas, said, with potential deepening of political and religious divides in the U.S., how specifically might these divisions impact the progress of LGBTQ rights and societal acceptance in the U.S.? You know, it's been part of this series I've been in on this podcast in the month of July, going through this thing called Project 2025. And I felt it appropriate to take a pause from the Project 2025 conversation in honor of this really awful and historical thing that happened. But the reality is, like, even right now, if you listen to this podcast at other times and on any of my other platforms, I record this podcast live on TikTok and Facebook and YouTube. And even right now, I'm watching somebody right now saying, no more unity. That right there. And now I'm going to practice for a moment. I'm going to practice hating the ideology and not the person. That ideology is dangerous. And that ideology right there is one of the reasons we have been in this shit storm we're in. We are in a shit NATO. Okay, yeah, even though this is a queer Christian speaking, I will say shit NATO on my own show freely. Okay? Because we're not willing to build bridges to one another. We see someone on the other side and we think, I don't want that person here. They're too weird for me. I'm going to burn it down and I'm going to just stop trying. Yeah, so shit NATO? yeah, for real. But I that's the first time I think I've ever said that word on my show. So yeah, these are going to have these, if the divide continues to keep growing, it is going to impact, it could have potential impacts on LGBTQ people. And that's why I want to advocate for us to stop pulling apart and dividing and finding that common ground. If you want to chat with me, hit request to join on Joanna Whaley Music at TikTok or on Facebook or YouTube. I would love to have you a part of the conversation. What are your thoughts on this? I'm a queer person who is voting blue. I'm pretty open about that. I'm voting blue, but I'm also seeing the humanity of a presidential candidate that I don't like. And I want to see this person as a human because that's the exact thing I'm asking the other side of the ideological debate to do for me. I, as a queer person, am asking conservatives to see me as a human being. So me, as a liberal queer Christian, I better damn well look at this moment and say, I see the humanity of Donald Trump, somebody I vehemently disagree with, but I need to be able to practice allowing myself to see someone else as a human being. Hi, friend. Welcome in.
Hi. I just want to say, even if we do vote blue, it's just like, I just don't feel like people are just not going to care. Because, like, for all the other people who don't know about Project 2025, who are going to vote for Trump,
yeah,
it's just like we're already cooked.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, right? And I think that's why I wanted to have this conversation is, like, despite my deep hatred of the ideology about Project 2025 and some of the conservative, like, human rights abuses and things like that.
Yes.
I think that I want to find a place in this argument and in this political fight to find the humanity of the opponent and fight against the ideology rather than the person, even though the person has done some crazy stuff. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. I hear with you, and it stinks. And I fear as a queer person, like, oh, great, this crazy thing that happened in Pennsylvania is just now going to be inevitable that Project 2025 comes to reality. Yeah.
I feel like I'm just going to vote third party.
Yeah, so what makes you want to do that?
It's just like, we need to have more options. It's not fair that we should have to pick between two.
I love it. I
nine.
do. I know. I wish it wasn't like a two-party system in the U.S. And I'm not like a political commentator, so I feel like if you watch Fox News, they say like, oh, if you vote third party, you're taking a vote from Trump, and then everybody on liberal media is like, if you vote for third party, you're giving it to Trump. So yeah, I never know what to think about that. But I remember Andrew Yang, who was running for president, was in the primaries 4 years ago, said that this is one of the biggest problems we have in America is a two-party system. So yeah, so thank you for chiming in with that. You know, it's a reality. Is that I'm not a political commentator, but this is deeply like integrated in everything that we do, especially as a queer person who fights for religious freedom for queer people. Sometimes we just have to get in the weeds with this stuff. And it just is so challenging. I mean, honestly, I would love to see a third party candidate win in this country. Gosh, it would be so great. Like, why can't we just say like, okay, there's 10 people running for president? I don't know. I don't understand American politics. I passed American, like, you know, political science and all that, but like, as I said, this is not a political podcast, so I'm not really sure why we do that. I want to, so, you know, there's just a lot to discuss here. Hi, friend. Welcome in.
Hey, good to see you. I just discovered you while scrolling through lives. I'm a queer person too. It's really good to see queer creators out here.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? Since you're new here, we're talking about what it means to be a queer person. And I've been very vocal about I'm liberal. I'm a queer Christian. You know, people have a hard time putting that together, but I absolutely detest most of the things that I see coming from the Trump campaign. But I've been talking about like finding the humanity in someone like Donald Trump, because that's exactly what us in the queer community are asking from conservatives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. So I think the MAGA conservative movement is in a lot of ways similar to what us as queer people go through.
Yeah.
And I know it's a weird correlation, but
no, I get it though. Like the red hat is almost the same. We get the same reaction as they may do with the rainbow flag.
And there's a really interesting Wall Street Journal opinion piece a couple years ago written about not only like the hate that the MAGA movement has instilled in a lot of people, but also the joy that happens within it. I mean, if you look at it, it's people having fun and it's people embracing themselves amongst a common commonalities and common ideas.
Right.
And I think that Republicans, I saw this on a there's this guy named Hassan Minhaj who works at The Daily Show. He put this really well. Republicans, they may be factually inaccurate, but they are very emotionally honest and good at messaging. Whereas Democrats are the opposite. We're factually accurate, but we're very poor at messaging. And sorry, I'm catching my breath. I'm walking right now. And I think that the MAGA movement gives a lot of people who don't really necessarily have a voice, just like queer people. Yeah. And it gives them a chance to speak out about stuff that they're fearful of. And I think the better way for us to move forward as a country is if instead of dismissing those things as stupid reasons to be afraid of, we need to acknowledge those fears and see if we can come to some sort of common ground.
Yeah. So Aiden, thank you for the call. We're running up against time here, and so right. I hope, Aiden, you turn off live and just enjoy the day. But thank you for tuning in, friends, to the podcast this week. Go be yourself and find the humanity in somebody you disagree with today. This has been a production of Whaley Media. Stick around if you're watching on live. We're going to keep this conversation going, and that conversation goes on patreon.com/JOANNA WHALEY. Thank you, friends. for being here. We'll be back next week talking more about Project 2025. If you're live, don't go anywhere.